Okay, this area where I've been showing you making the garden, to the best of my knowledge, it has never ever been worked, tilled, planted, or fertilized or anything else. It's as far as I know in its completely raw state. All I've done is take my spade and turn the sod upside down so that, well, as you can see, some of the roots are underground. A little bit of the grass is coming up, but it's still not too bad. That rots the sod and adds some nutrition back into the soil. Because this has never been touched before, as far as I know, that will give me a good baseline as to what I've got to work with to start. And I'll keep that in a small book that I keep for records of my gardening. And I can refer back to it as to where I started, and then as I add different amendments into the soil, like this trailer full of it's about 3-year-old horse manure, so it's already pretty much composted by itself. So I'm going to be adding a lot of that in here, and I can get as much of it as I want. So I'm going to put this trailer load in here. I'm going to start a compost pile separately as well, and we'll see what it takes to get this place into a very rich garden that's going to produce far more food per square foot than it will if we don't do that extra work. Okay, so get out of my shadow here. The idea here is that they want you, in the test kit instructions, to take your soil sample from approximately 4 inches below the surface. Now, it's not that long ago that I turned this over with the spade, so it's hard to tell just exactly where all that surface area was. But the reason they do that is so that the very top couple of inches of the soil can be a bit leached out with the rain and everything that comes by, and that can leach the nutrients a little deeper into the ground. What they want is 1 cup of soil to 5 cups of preferably distilled water, but certainly clean water. It occurs to me I don't have a cup measure, so I just took this mug, and the important part of this all is the 5-to-1 ratio. It doesn't matter. As long as the ratio is 5-to-1, the quantity isn't really important. In the end, all you really are trying to do is get probably 3 or 4 ounces of nutrient water, and you'll see how that works. So you don't need to make very much of this. Now, I've taken a little more than the cup full because I'm going to dump it into the stainless steel there, pan, and I'm going to pick all the little bits of roots and everything out of it. We try to get it as clean as we can. You want the complete absorption, I guess, if you want to say it, of the moisture into the soil to leach out or to liquefy the nutrients, and then we're going to make a slurry out of that with 5 cups of water using the same cup, so we get the same 5-to-1 ratio we're supposed to have. So when you get this done, you put your water in, you stir it up thoroughly, really well, get it all mixed in with the water, turn it into a real mud, basically a muddy water, and when you've got that done, then you let it sit so that the nutrients in the soil can really be absorbed into the water, and then you'll get a proper reading according to this particular, and that's just for this brand of kit. Other kits of different brands may have slightly different systems, but it's all on the instructions. But these kits are valuable. They tell you a lot about what your soil is like. They tell you a lot about what your soil isn't like. And what you need to do, and then they usually give you some instructions as to what it takes in order to change the readings you're getting. So, do you need to add phosphorus, or nitrogen, or potash, whatever the case may be, to bring your soil up to speed. I'm trying to not introduce any foreign nutrients into this mixture that might be in the water. And so they say distilled water is the best. It's not absolutely mandatory, but it will probably give you a smoother or a more natural reading. Okay, the water in these buckets here is just rainwater. That's how much rain. There's probably 5 inches of water in there. That's how much rain we've had in the last several days. Aside from a few floating bugs, it's probably as clean a water as I'm likely to get. So that's what I'm going to use. So here's our soup. Mud cakes, mud pies, anybody? Feel like a kid. Anyways, I'm stirring this up. I'm just using a fork. I'm stirring this up. Don't worry about your dishes, folks. This is just clean soil and a little bit of rainwater. It's going to wash up just perfect. All this is about our organic gardening homestead, and we want to get the most. Now I have more than enough land here. I could have huge gardens, but what's the point of having to till up and maintain a garden that's, you know, a half an acre in size, when I can get the same amount of production from a garden that's maybe 30 by 40 or something like that, by having a much nutrient dense soil and much better growing conditions. That's the kit there. That's the rapid test, and it's a very, very simple kit to use. The reason I say so, you get 4 separate vials, one for each test. So nitrogen, phosphorus, pH, the whole bit. They're color coded, as you can see, and then you get 40 little capsules, one color coded to match each of these. Well, there's 40 tests actually. There's 10 of each, but what they're color coded to match these capsules, so you can't really go far wrong. Now, the 3 tests for nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, or yeah, potash, you can. They all come from that mixture we made earlier, but the pH test is a little bit different. This one has a line here, and you put a tiny bit of the soil right in here, then you put some water in it, and then you open up one of these capsules and you pour it in the top, you shake it up really good, and then in 1 minute you take your reading. So that's how that one works. These 3 will be taken with samples from that liquid that we're making from the really muddy water, and you put them in here, and you just put it in the container here. You add the required amount of water up to the line, you give it a really good shake, and you wait for 10 minutes, and then you take your reading. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the pH test first. We can do that now. I've reserved a little bit of the soil, and it just takes just the tiniest fraction in the bottom. It doesn't take much. Alright, so it goes without saying that whatever implements, tools you're going to use for this job, you want to use the ones that are clean. You don't want to contaminate your readings. So the level for soil is down here. Like, there's very, very little soil. So I'm going to take the cap off, and they seal pretty good. Take that off, and the soil only goes on the one side. Doesn't go on the large side. It just goes a little wee bit on the bottom side here. Actually, I'm going to use this. So we're just going to scoop up a little bit till we can get some down in there. And that's almost it. There's a couple of air gaps there, so I'm going to just add no, I can do a little more. Always take a little bit out if we get too enthusiastic. Okay, that looks really, really good. Now here's our eyedropper, and here's the same cup of water we had from earlier. So we're going to put water in up to here. That's looking pretty good. Put the cap on. We'll give it a good shake. Okay, we're going to let that sit there for approximately 1 minute. Now you want to do this in daylight. You don't want to use fluorescent lights or whatever, because they can discolor your reading, not give you a true reading. But you don't want to do it in direct sunlight. What we'll do is we're going to put in our capsule. So we take the green capsule to match the green top. This is where it's tricky because they're small capsules and fat fingers. Okay, and we carefully, very carefully, open this up. They just split in half like any capsule, and we pour our little bit of stuff in there. I, of course, am spilling some. Well, not too much. Anyways, okay. We'll put the cap back on. We'll give it another good shake. This is where we wait the minute, see what happens. Alright, we'll just let that sit. We'll call it a minute. We'll come back in about a minute and see what it looks like. Okay, so it's been a minute. I'm just going to move this back here a little bit for you. I don't know how well you can see that. It's actually not any of those colors really, but it's probably, here, I'm going to move it over to the light for just a moment. It has a fairly definite bluish tinge. It's definitely not, obviously, as you can see here with my hand over there, you can see it's not anywhere in the red or orange zone. It's definitely in that blue-green type. Now, moss green, it's more of a blue-green on the top. It's not quite that intense, but it's probably somewhere between these top two. So that's telling me that the pH here is about 7, between 7 and 7.5. So that's probably just a little high for most plants. I think most plants, they have a pretty good tolerance either way, but they probably want to be more in the 6 to 6.5 range would be a bit more of a neutral. So I have a small adjustment to make there, but actually it's not horrible. Okay, so due to a bit of a glitch in the filming, or in the SD card, at any rate, I lost the actual tests and results from 3 of the 4 tests here. So I redid the mud water formula there, but I did it in a jar this time. I should have probably done it that way the first time. That way I could get 2 different ideas, 2 different results from the same test. So that's exactly the same thing. It's a 5-to-1 ratio of some soil from the garden and some rainwater. Excuse me. By putting it in a jar like this, it gives me the added advantage of being able to see the different layers. That's actually getting worse. The different layers of soil that would be in your garden there. So normally you might have some loam, you might have some sandiness, so on and so forth, a bit of heavier grit perhaps, and you would actually see the 3 different layers because of the different weights. They settle at different speeds. So you would see distinctive little layers of what the different soils were. I don't have that because there isn't anything in there but clay. So I have only a single layer of the same kind of clayish mud at the bottom. So it didn't really tell me a lot except that there's not much in there. So let's go ahead and redo the tests, and this time I'll be able to show you the results. And as you can see, the color codes, you know, blue and blue, orange and purple. So we're just going to match them up just like we did the first time, except you'll see it this time. So I'm going to start doing that and then I'll bring you back. Okay, so like anything, if you do a test for something and you do only one test, the chances of getting a true exact reading are pretty slim. You never know, there could be some minor contaminant that spoiled your test or whatever. So if you do, it gives you a very almost no base of a comparison, no comparison at all. If you do 10 tests, then you've got a broader base to base your answers on, or your whatever you've tested for. If you do 100 tests or 1,000, as you can see, it gets better and better as far as the accuracy of your test goes, because now you've got a good comparison to what's going on. Anyway, I'm not going to do 1,000 tests, of course. What I will do, though, and I've very carefully taken the lid off of this because I don't want it to spill, and I don't want to shake it up. I don't want to get that sediment back in there, so I'm going to very carefully take this capsule, take it in half, there, the other half. Now you can't see it probably here, but there's a line right basically at the point of that color change where it's clear to the color. There's a tiny little dotted line there that's very hard to see. So I'm just going to turn this around so I can see it myself. I'm going to take my eyedropper and very carefully get as much of the clearer water, as much as that might be, from the top here. Now the murkiness of the water isn't really going to change your reading. not going to spoil the reading that you're getting. All it does is it makes it, the murkier it is, the more difficult it is, of course, to be able to judge, you know, exactly the color. Just have a look. Okay, so that's good. So I'm going to put this cap on. Eventually here. Oops. That's the wrong cap. That's the cap. Okay, so this is the test for nitrogen. We're going to give this a shake up. Make it nice and mixed up. And then we're going to let it sit for 10 minutes. And I'm going to do the same thing. Get it nice and shook up here. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing for these two. I won't bore you with doing this on here because I'm pretty klutzy. It takes me a minute. But I'm going to just do exactly the same thing. I'm going to put the capsule of powder in there, hopefully without the capsule this time. We're going to put a little water in there and shake it, and then in about 10 minutes I'll time it, and in 10 minutes we'll come back and we'll see what the results are. Okay, so I'm going to stand behind the camera for a minute. As you can see, and I'll zoom in here a bit, there is virtually no color change in any of the three. Perhaps a little bit on the potash in the center. That's probably adequate, if not good. But let's look at the other three, or the other two, because there's it's almost completely depleted. So on this one here, I'm just going to lift it up so I can see it. You want to look at this in daylight. You don't want to have direct sunlight on it, but you want to look at it in daylight, not in, yeah, you know, with the murkiness in there, there's almost nothing. So it's absolutely depleted. There's just 0% phosphate in there, or phosphorus. That's just done. Now the potash here, that's not half bad actually. That says it's pretty sufficient. So we don't really have to do anything with potash. That's good. It's also the easiest one to change, and I'm going to look at this one now here. Now this one is the nitrogen, and again, there's virtually no color in there. Virtually nothing at all. And you can probably see that as you're looking at it. So what that tells me is that basically I have almost pure clay. Except for some potash in there, there's almost absolutely no nutrients in that soil. There's really no loam, and I can tell that by looking at the jar here that I've done, and there normally would be a stratification of layers. So heavier stuff like sand would be at the bottom, then you might have a bit of a soil level which would be more of a loam, and then you might have a layer at the top which could be more of a silty clay. And you would see three distinct layers, and there aren't any. There's one layer in the bottom, just clay muck. So I'm starting off pretty much with 0. So that's my baseline, and I'll write that down in the book. I'll write the results down here in the book, and so now I can always refer back to that. That book is my gardening book. I think I've mentioned that already. Because I'm reshooting this, there's going to be some overlap in what I'm saying. I'll try and edit that out as best I can. So anyways, this is our test. Now we know what we've got, which is in my case pretty much nothing. But that's okay. Now we know. So now I know that you know, I need to put a lot of amendments in the soil. So what I've already done is well, actually, I'm going to save that for the next video, because there's a sort of a part 2 coming for this as to what to do about this. So that's it for today. This is a great way to start your garden, no matter where you are, no matter how old your garden may have been established, you know, a long time ago or whatever. You need to know where it stands now. That's why we do crop rotation, because we need to know, you know, what's being taken out of the soil by the plants. So you don't plant the same beans or the same carrots or whatever in the same location. You rotate them around. And this is exactly why. And once you see this, and you can take this, you know, if you've got a fairly large garden, take a sample, you know, from one end, and then another sample from the middle, and then another sample from the other end, or crossways, or however you do your planting, and see, or each location where you know, if you had beans there and then you had tomatoes, and take a sample from each section and see what's depleted by that last crop that was in there. Then you can add whatever you need back into the soil, do your crop rotation, and you'll have a much healthier garden, much healthier plants, and a great yield, far superior to the yield that you might get if you don't do any of these things. So thanks for watching. Appreciate it. We'll come on with part 2 here shortly, which is what to do about all these answers we've got here, and we'll see you then. Have a great week, everyone.